Within the newest set, the Darkness support cards, we have brand new Evil Hero support. This is for Supreme Darkness. Evil Hero Toxic Bubble is a level 4 water attribute fiend effect monster with 800 attack and 1200 defense. You can only special summon the first effect of this card's name once per turn. You can only use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. 1. You can special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way, you cannot special summon for the rest of this turn except hero monsters. And 2. If this card is special summoned and you control a fusion monster that must be special summoned with Dark Fusion, you can draw 2 cards. This is the Evil Hero version of Bubbleman. It has exactly the same stats, attack and defense. Only difference really is both the effect and the fact that this is a fiend, whereas the original Bubbleman is a warrior type. The first effect just allows you to straight away special summon this card, whereas the original Bubbleman only allows you to special summon if it's the only card you have in your hand. Now, it does lock you into hero-specific monsters, but that isn't a bad thing given the sheer number of hero-based monsters we have in the game. Second ability, provided this card has been special and it can be done so pretty quickly, as long as you've got a fusion monster that has been summoned through Dark Fusion, you get to draw 2 cards. This is also an upgrade to the original Bubbleman, as Bubbleman could only work to draw 2 cards if it's the last card you have in your hand and it's the only card you have present. Therefore, you cannot have anything and just randomly draw into the Bubbleman to use its effect. It's inconsistent for the deck, whereas this adds complete consistency. It works so well within the deck. It's unbelievable, and it's a decent form of adding 2 cards. It says here that this is obviously the evil version of Elemental Hero Bubbleman, but it also mentions that it's the Neo Bubbleman, and I can make an understanding towards that because if you look at the headgear itself is more towards the Neo Bubbleman as opposed to the original Bubbleman, which tends to be a bit more dome-liked, as that has kind of more spiking on the head. Evil Hero Doom Prison is a level 4 light attribute rock type effect monster with 1700 attack and 1100 defense. You can only special summon with the first effect of this card's name once per turn. You can only use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. 1. If you control a fusion monster that must be special with Dark Fusion, you can special summon this card from your hand. 2. You can send 1 hero monster from your deck to the graveyard. If you fusion summon a hero monster this turn, this face-up card can be used as a substitute for any 1 fusion material whose name is mentioned on it, but the other materials must be correct. This is the equivalent Evil Hero version of the Prisma. It has the same stat lines as the original one, but a much better effect. Provided you have a fusion monster that has been special summoned with Dark Fusion, you can instantly special summon this card. And the second ability is what makes this card fantastic. You're just able to send a hero monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you fusion summon a hero monster this turn, it can be used as any substitute for a fusion material whose name is mentioned on that particular card. The other materials do have to be correct, so you are limited in that respect. However, with the original Prisma, you had to reveal said fusion monster from your etch deck, and then you had to send a particular material from that card from your deck to the graveyard. That meant you had to run the various Brit monsters that you don't necessarily want to do so. This bypasses that stage. It allows you to just name any of the heroes just by sending a hero, but it does have to be in the presence of a fusion summon, so there is one form of restriction to it. Evil Hero Infernal Rider is a level 6 wind attribute fiend type effect monster with 2100 attack and 800 defense. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add 1 Dark Fusion from your deck or graveyard to your hand. 2. You can banish this card and 4 other monsters from your graveyard. Set 1 superpolymerization from your deck. Also, until the end of your opponent's turn, you cannot special summon except hero monsters, but you can fusion summon fusion monsters that must be special with Dark Fusion, with effects other than it. This card is one which isn't thematic to the archetype, as I haven't seen any cards similar to this ever before. This is kind of like a unique design. It has 2100 attack and it's a level 6 monster, therefore you're pretty much having to cheat this out with the adjusted gold, as that can special summon any of your evil hero monsters without any of those conditions. As soon as this card is either normal or special summoned, you can just straight away search for a Dark Fusion from your deck or graveyard to your hand, so it not only has the ability to search, but it also has a recovery effect. Second ability, you have to banish this card and 4 other monsters from your graveyard. You're able to set a superpolarization from your deck, but bear in mind there are a couple of restrictions. You need to banish a total of 5 monsters from your graveyard to use this effect, therefore it does take a lot of resources, and you cannot special summon except hero monsters for the rest until your opponents end their turn. But you can also special summon monsters that require Dark Fusion, therefore you're not limited purely to hero monsters. The limits of the Dark Fusion aren't actually too bad, as it allows you to fusion summon into any Fiend fusion monster. Therefore, you can actually apply this to lots of different decks. I had a quick search on Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, and that was suggesting things such as, the Chaos Armour is in there, you've got a few of the Fight Fur monsters, you have various other archetypes that do fit within this. And so this card and its effect is only ever going to get better. It's never going to get worse as more Fiend fusion monsters get introduced into the game. It mentions here as part of the notes that this card references Picador Fiend, which showed up in O'Brien. So O'Brien is the Japanese name for Axel Brody in his nightmares, when he dreams of the Supreme King on his king's steed. So that's where the emphasis is. I do remember the episode. He kind of wakes up in a cold sweat, kind of thinking, oh, this is a disaster. What am I going to do? How do I face the Supreme King? He is too powerful for me. It's a little bit of an insult that Titan hasn't received Picador Fiend, as that was introduced in, I believe, episode 43, 44, somewhere around that, where he had faced Alexis Rhodes the second time as the Shadow Rider. In that, it was a weaker monster. I think it had 1600 attack points, and it was pretty much relied upon as one of his main monsters. Evil Hero Neos Lord is a level 10 Dark Attribute Fiend type fusion effect monster with 2500 attack and defense. The materials are an Elemental Hero Neos or one fusion monster that mentions it and an effect monster on the field. It must be special summoned with Dark Fusion. You can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. 1 if this card is special summoned or if a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard while this monster is on the field. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, take control of it. 2 it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. The materials on this card make sense as it's trying to merge the different parts of Jaden Yuki's deck. So you've got Elemental Hero Neos, which is the main card that Jaden relies on, and his dark emphasis being the Supreme King. I would suggest that you're not likely to go with a fusion material monster that has Neos in it, as that's more steps to go into and it's a waste, and it requires an effect monster on the field. It does have to be special summoned with Dark Fusion, so it doesn't allow you to use superpolarization outside of, for example, the previous card, which was the Picador Fiend, as that kind of negates that kind of restriction to it. It still allows you to fusion summon almost as though you're using it as Dark Fusion. The first part of the effect, when this card is special summoned, so it can be initially when it's fusion summoned or if it's revived back from the graveyard through cards such as Monster Reborn, or if a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard whilst this is present on the field, you can just take a opponent's face-up monster and take control of it. It's a decent effect as it can be used, although it can only be used once in a turn. If your opponent's trying to set up for things, they almost have to get rid of this card first to ensure that their monsters aren't taken, especially the key components of those decks. Second ability prevents this card from being destroyed by battle or card effects, probably more relevant when the initial series featuring the Supreme King came out, as there weren't so many ways of outing this card, but these days you've got so many options for you, it's not really that effective. I love the design on the artwork of this card as it just combines really well those types of monsters, and it makes sense that it is a Fiend monster as that's basically what you have to summon out from Dark Fusion. It is also a shame that it has to be limited to Dark Fusion, as I believe there are alternative cards which could work quite well with this. It having a balanced attack and defense, it's fine, but it's not really in and of itself going to be more so a powerhouse. It's more reliant on being an extender for your copy, for your strategies. Evil Hero Inferno Wing Infernal Backlash is a level 6 Fire Attribute Fiend type fusion effect monster. with a 2100 attack and 1200 defense. The materials are an elemental hero avian or elemental hero burstinatrix, plus 1 hero monster, and it must be special summoned with dark fusion. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. If this card is special summoned, you can add 1 dark fusion or 1 card that mentions it from your deck or graveyard to your hand except a fusion monster. And 2. If your hero monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict 2100 damage to them. The materials on this card require either an avian or a burstinatrix plus another hero monster. That could be any hero from any of the sub-archetypes, be that Destiny, Evil Hero, Elemental Hero, Vision Hero, or Masked Hero, and therefore can be pretty much splashed into any kind of hero pile deck. It also means that you're not reliant on having to draw into said both avian and burstinatrix, which in the past, less so nowadays, but because we got so much fusion support, that's generic, but in the past that would have been a bit of a nightmare. First ability, as soon as this card is special summoned, so it can also be either when it's initially fusion summoned, or revived from the graveyard through Monster Reborn as an example. You can search for a dark fusion or 1 card that mentions it from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except a fusion monster. You wouldn't really go for a fusion monster as that gets returned to the etch deck, and there are plenty of cards that can do that for you. Most of the cards that happen to be evil heroes will mention dark fusion somewhere in their text. That means this card can search for practically anything within the deck. Second ability, if a hero monster destroys an opponent's monster with battle, it's 2100 points of damage straight to their face. That means it doesn't matter if it's this card or another hero, so long as it's one of them, you do that damage. It's a shame that the second ability is only a once per turn, because if you could do this multiple times over, if you did this over 4 times, that would be enough to wipe out your opponent's life points. It's nice that it standardizes the damage to 2100 points, as within the original Inferno Wing that guarantees that effect as well, because I believe the way that effect works is that it does damage to your opponent based on the highest stat it has. So if your opponent has a high defense stat, it bases it off that, and it also inflicts the difference between its attack points and that opponent's monster's defense points, pretty much guaranteeing you're doing 2100 points of damage anyway. The note here says this card takes its name from the effect of Evil Hero Inferno Wing and not the attack. Something like with Red Eyes Black Dragon that has Inferno Fire Blast, which is the name of the attack. I wonder whether in the future we'll be getting alternative versions of that. Evil Hero Dark Knight is a level 8 Earth Attribute Fiend Fusion Effect Monster. It has 1600 attack and 0 defense. And the materials are a Fiend monster plus a Warrior monster. It must be special with Dark Fusion. 1. Monsters your opponent controls lose attack equal to the total original attack of the fusion materials used for this card's summon. 2. It can make a second attack during each battle phase. And 3. If this face-up special summoned card you control leaves the field by your opponent, you can target 1 Fiend or Warrior monster in your graveyard, special summon it in a defense position. At first glance, you may look at this and think 1600 attack and 0 defense doesn't seem impressive for a level 8 monster. But bear in mind that its impressiveness comes down to its fusion materials. It does need a specific Fiend monster and a Warrior monster. It's general enough to run in deck, as you'll be running a mixture of both, I'm assured of that. But the higher the sacrifice you give up to bring this card out, the more suppressed your opponent's monster's attack points become. It's fine, but bear in mind this effect can also be quite easily negated, and in doing so you've mitigated all that hard work to bring into this card. It also can only be special summoned with Dark Fusion. I know you also have there's a spell card which is like Miracle Fusion for the deck as well, which treats itself as Dark Fusion, and so it can be summoned through that method as well. Its attack stat implies Infernal Gainer, as that card also has 1600 attack points, and it pretty much mimics the effect. With Infernal Gainer, that banishes itself to allow one of your Fiend monsters the ability to attack twice in that turn. This does the same, but rather than having to banish itself or use any other requirements, it just intrinsically allows it to attack twice each turn. It doesn't have to be just on monsters, and so that's quite nice as it can go into direct attacks, but the most damage you're going to do is 3200 points. If this card, and it just, so long as it's been special summoned, so that can be either through fusion or actually been revived from the graveyard by cards such as Monster Reborn, leaves the field by the opponent, so that can be Kaiju'd, it could be just removed, banished, however it leaves the field, doesn't matter. return to the hand, for example, return to the extra deck, you're fine. You can take a Fiend or Warrior monster in your graveyard and special summon it in defense position, so it has a method of replacing itself. Dark Contact is a normal spell card. One activate one of these effects, but you can only use each effect of this card's name once per turn. Fusion, summon one fusion monster that must be special summoned with Dark Fusion from your extra by shuffling its materials from your field, graveyard, and or banishment into the deck. This is treated as a fusion summon with a Dark Fusion. Add one Supreme King's Castle or Dark Fusion from your deck to your hand. This card can use both of its effects, but you're going to have 2 copies of this card in your hand in order to do that in the same turn. First ability just lets you fusion summon a fusion monster with Dark Fusion by shuffling those materials, so that's the field, the graveyard, and all the banishment. Pretty much takes out all of the considerations that the original Dark Fusion requires, as that can only fusion summon monsters either from your hand or on your field. It cannot touch any other point, and it's still treated as a Dark Fusion summon. That's fine, as it's a way of recovering your resources without you having to run anything that happens to be outside of that archetype. In terms of searching for the cards, Supreme King's Castle will have a quick review of what that does. With the Dark Fusion, that's fine. Okay, so this is their field spell. You can fusion summon fusion monsters that must be special summoned with Dark Fusion with effects other than Dark Fusion. Once per turn during a damage calculation, if your Fiend monster battles an opponent's monster, you can send one Evil Hero monster from your deck or extra to the graveyard. Your monster gains attack equal to the level of the monster sent to the graveyard times 200 until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. This card allows you to treat any of your fusion cards as though they are Dark Fusion, which works perfectly within the deck, as you could really just use Super Polarization and it would be treated the same way. That's the main focus, I think, and design on this card. The other effect just lets, if you've got a Fiend monster and it doesn't have to be an in-archetype Evil Hero battle, just by sending an Evil Hero from the deck or the extra deck to the graveyard, your monster gains attack times that level. So I think some of the highest ones are level 10, that boosts your monsters up to an additional 2,000 attack points, which isn't bad, but this is quite a slow and predictable field spell to counteract. The design on this card is quite similar to something that is called Contact Out, which was used in combination with the Neospacians. Differences, this seems to be fusing with dark creatures. Evil Assault is a normal spell card. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name once per turn each. 1. Discard 1 card. You cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, except hero monsters. Also, take 1 level 4 or lower evil hero monster from the deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it. 2. If this card is in a graveyard except the turn it was sent there, you can banish it, add 1 Dark Fusion from your graveyard to your hand. The first ability on this card is just by discarding a card, you can take a level 4 or lower evil hero monster from your deck and it either adds it to the hand or you get to special summon it. Currently there aren't too many cards equivalent to that. I mean, you do have the new Toxic card, so you've got that, you've got the Evil Hero Prodigy, you've got the Doom Prism, or you've got the Infernal Prodigy, which I think is their equivalent to Hero Kid. You've got those as examples. I don't think until you get some more support that this is really that useful. Outside of maybe with the discard effect, there are certain cards that happen to work and activate in the graveyard, which you can get a double usage out of. Second ability, when this card is in the graveyard, it cannot be used during the turn it was sent there, but that's a similar kind of restriction given to most of these types of cards. By banishing it, you can either take a Dark Fusion from your graveyard and add that straight to the hand, so it forms some type of recovery. As you can see from the image, it pretty much is suggesting that you bring out the Infernal Gainer, but it's not that great. And this card is the Dark card. You can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. Target face-up cards your opponent controls up to a number of Dark Fusion and spells that mention it in your graveyard. Negate their effects until the end of this turn. 2. If this card is in your graveyard except the turn it was sent there, you can banish it, then target up to 5 hero monsters in your graveyard, and on banishment, shuffle them into the deck. First ability, provided you've got Dark Fusion and spells that have that in their graveyard, you're able to disrupt your opponent's cards, but they have to be face-up cards. I liken this to, there is a trap card for the Raid Raptors, it's one of the new ones, that pretty much does the same type of thing, but it only works against one particular card for that turn. It normally only negates the monster effect, but if you've got an Xyz Raid Raptor monster, that also can negate any face-up card. And it also works similar to the Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, which also has the ability to suppress cards. It's a new design and it's a good way of getting rid of your opponent's normal spell and trap effects, which may not be able to reoccur or very difficult to get other copies to your hand to get the same effects. Second ability works very much like a Pot of Avarice effect. It recovers your hero monsters, and any of the hero monsters, it doesn't have to be specifically evil heroes, from not only the graveyard, but the banishment, and you get to shuffle those back into the deck. There are other cards which have similar types of effects to this, but it's quite decent for its design. Overall, I think it's pretty decent as an effect, but we'll have a look at what the comments section is saying here. I think generally my consensus from a lot of the comments is that they were looking forward to this type of support, but they're still missing a few cards. My biggest question is, we have 3 fusion monsters. We have this one, which is quite a strange one. It's just completely out of the, just very unusual. I can understand its point and its relevance, but it doesn't actually mirror or mimic much of any of the cards. This one, it's kind of supposed to be a retrain of the Infernal Wing, but I think Infernal Wing is pretty decent as it is. I think we would have been much better situation had they got more fusions as alternative evil hero monsters. That would have been great. And also with this other one, it's just kind of fan service. I know it's meant to focus in on the combination of Neos being absorbed by the Supreme King, but here's my question to everyone, and I don't think this is something that a lot of people have thought of. Whilst we have, Prisma is very generic. It doesn't have a set card that it fuses into. Fine. I can understand that. I get it. I understand, I know that, there aren't any particular cards that work as a material. It's just a generic extender for those fusions. But with the Toxic Bubbleman, oh come on, you've got so many different Bubbleman fusion monsters that have not received an evil hero version. So you've got Mariner. That card is the fusion of Bubbleman and Avian. You have Steam Healer, which is the fusion of Bubbleman and Bestinatrix. You have Mudbullman, which is the fusion of Bubbleman and Clayman. You have Tempest, which is the fusion of Bubbleman, Avian, and Sparkman. You have Electrum, which is the fusion of Avian, Bubbleman, Clayman, and Sparkman. I think all of these cards need a bit more support. I'm hoping we're going to get at least 1 or 2 hidden fusion monsters. And there's so many things you can do with that, so many ways you can upgrade those effects. Just look at Mudbull, that doesn't actually have an effect. How difficult would it be for Konami to just slap on an effect for an evil hero version to say, this card can attack in defense position using its defense stats? I mean, you've already done that with the Super Heavy Samurai archetype, they pretty much run like that. It wouldn't be unreasonable to put that type of effect. I'd love to know what you guys think of this card in the comments down below. As always, I'd love to kind of interact with those comments. I am going to be making a separate video in the future, which will be looking at particular cards, which could be alternative versions of the fusions for Elemental Hero Bubbleman. So it's alternatives for Mariner, Tempest, Mudbullman, Electrum, and give you case examples of why those cards would be relevant and how those are upgrades to the original cards. As always, I'd like for you to make sure to like the video. It really helps support the channel, and it'd be great if you could consider subscribing. Thank you.